So by now, you've probably seen a dozen of these AI bubble videos.
How NVIDIA and OpenAI fuel the AI money machine.
I believe the AI industry is in a very big bubble.
We are in an AI bubble.
Is it a bubble?
But what they've all missed is what's truly behind it all. And I don't blame them, because the bubble is confusing as it is, and that's all by design. While this tech company funds this and then this one back around in a loop, Wall Street has been bankrolling the entire AI infrastructure boom using the very same tactics that crashed housing in 2008. Only this time, I don't think it's a bubble. It's far worse. It's a $1.8 trillion black hole where money goes in and it never comes back out. Just like before, it will only be obvious once it's too late. But if you think I'm just fear-mongering, Michael Berry, who predicted 2008, is already making the same bet. Look, it doesn't matter at all whether you're for or against AI, it doesn't. Because I'll show you how you're already paying for it in a way that's actually easy to understand and what I think is the biggest bet in human history. And even if they get it all wrong, guess who will end up paying for it?
AI is real, and it is going to change every industry.
The idea that chips and ontology is what you want to short is batshit crazy.
So to understand this whole thing, the best way is to build out the bubble in a way where it's actually simple. Because once you see the system, you'll begin to understand all the players that are involved that's out in the open and hidden, and why this is a black hole rather than a bubble. So let's break it down, starting with showing you the most important players that you need to know. First, the AI lab companies. You already know this, like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, and Musk's xAI and Grok. Second, the chip makers that power AI, like NVIDIA and AMD. And third, data center providers like Oracle and CoreWeave that buy billions of dollars of these chips, store them in massive facilities, and then rent out that compute to the AI labs. And finally, these guys, which I'll reveal who a bit later on. But for now, remember those three to understand how the system is artificially propped up in a circular loop. And the loop begins with NVIDIA, the most valuable company in the world. And as you'll see, where all the loops lead back to. And recently, NVIDIA invests up to $100 billion in OpenAI. Sounds generous, right? Well, there's a catch. OpenAI must use that money to buy millions of NVIDIA chips, so NVIDIA gives OpenAI money to buy NVIDIA products. So essentially a discount disguised as an investment. But that doesn't matter on paper or to the public. As soon as a deal is announced, NVIDIA's revenue increases, stock goes up, and now they have even more money to invest back into OpenAI. And now the loop is in motion. OpenAI then signs a $300 billion deal with Oracle to build massive data centers. And just like that, Oracle stock spikes 36% in one day. Oh, but I almost forgot to mention, OpenAI only makes $12 billion in revenue. So how the hell are they signing $300 billion deals? Well, that's the beautiful thing about this circle. Oracle takes that $300 billion and uses it to buy tens of billions in NVIDIA chips for their data centers, and NVIDIA now has more money to reinvest into an OpenAI. And just like that, the super loop restarts, but that's just the beginning. Because in order to keep this going, you have to remove all the perceived risk. So remember CoreWeave? Well, they're a data center provider that needs chips to rent out to an AI lab like OpenAI. And so to make this happen, CoreWeave buys huge quantities of NVIDIA chips to install in their data centers, but with a trick. The deal NVIDIA generously gave to CoreWeave is that if they can't find enough customers, NVIDIA will buy any unused chips back risk-free. But hold on, there's more. When CoreWeave filed for IPO recently, it turns out that NVIDIA owned 5% of the company. And NVIDIA agreed to anchor the IPO with a $250 million order to boost up investor confidence. So you see the pattern here. Revenue gets recorded, stock prices go up, and rinse and repeat. So as I've laid that out, now it's very easy to blame these few companies. But the bubble didn't grow to this size on its own. The thing is, everyone is playing the same game, but in slightly different financial engineering strategies. Because NVIDIA isn't the only chip maker in town. And since AI labs like OpenAI require massive amounts of compute power, they're also buying billions in AMD chips. But in this deal, it's extremely unusual. AMD gives OpenAI the right to buy 10% of AMD stock for 1 cent each. 1 cent, but the stipulation is that the stock only vests if AMD's stock price rises after the partnership, which of course it does. Because the very second that OpenAI publicly announces this massive AMD deal, AMD's stock spikes. And today, AMD's stock price is actually higher than Nvidia's. And this is exactly where our fourth and not so secret player comes in, big tech. Oh yeah, you really thought that they wouldn't be here? Amazon has invested $8 billion in Anthropic, the AI lab that makes Claude, and in return, Anthropic has to use AWS cloud and chips. Google does the same thing, but $3 billion into Anthropic, and don't think OpenAI isn't taking similar deals. Microsoft has already pumped $13 billion into them to keep them locked into their infrastructure. So what does this all create? It removes actual competition and replaces it with this multi-headed dependency where everybody's betting on everyone else in this small little circle. And within those bigger circles, smaller bubbles are growing by the day. Like when Nvidia invests in xAI, Elon Musk's AI lab. And as you've seen the pattern by now, xAI buys Nvidia chips. But what you may not have heard about is that xAI absorbed Twitter or X earlier this year, so xAI can pull data from X to train Grok, its AI model. Tesla then uses Grok in its cars and robots, and Musk wants Tesla shareholders to fund xAI, creating a self-contained ecosystem where money, data, and compute all loop across Musk's assets. And as I've mentioned throughout, the big bubble continues to grow at scale because the market rewards this sort of behavior. Because remember how I said that all loops lead back to Nvidia? Well, all those stock jumps mean that Nvidia is now worth $5 trillion or more than Japan and Germany's entire GDP. And if they want to keep that growing, they need to continue to convince the public that the demand will keep rising forever, which means that they have every incentive to manufacture demand, not just meet it. So hopefully you see the full picture now, and it's exactly why economists are sounding the alarm of round tripping, the same trick that Enron used in the 2000s when company A sells an asset to company B with a secret agreement to buy back a similar asset later. And the result of that looks like companies making money when they're really not. So I think you don't need to be a genius to know why these are red flags. But even with all that said, is this really a bubble though? Well, to answer that, I need to tell you about the hidden players quietly making all of this happen. Because while everyone's been distracted by these headlines and stock prices, Wall Street has been quietly buying up the actual infrastructure that is needed for all of this to function, from land, data centers, and power. And along with big tech, they're making the biggest bet in human history. And as you'll see, they're willing to pay any premium to make that happen. And the thing is, we've only seen the beginning. By 2030, $7 trillion is said to be spent on data center infrastructure. Since 2022, private equity firms have acquired over 450 data center companies. That's 80 to 90% of all mergers in the sector. And in 2024 alone, they announced $115 billion in deals, nearly double the prior 2 years combined. And what private equity is doing is that they're buying these buildings to lease them to big tech, and it's the perfect arrangement. Private equity builds a shell to collect rent payments, and big tech invests their money into faster and better AI tech while keeping the liability off their balance sheets. But you might be thinking, why is no one talking about this? Well, simple. What do you think gets more clicks? ChatGPT passing the bar exam, or a company most people have never heard of like Blackstone acquiring multi-billion-dollar data centers?
Blackstone becoming an AI player.
Okay, and now you might be thinking, well, so what? Well, because this is how the risks multiply. First, if this AI boom ends up cooling off and hyperscalers need less space, private equity is about to be stuck with empty warehouses full of unused or outdated servers. And if you've seen any of my private equity videos, these deals are usually funded with massive debt in a leveraged buyout. So now you can deduce that if they can't pay it back, these losses ripple through these banks and credit markets. But the second and bigger reason why you should care is because you're already paying for it. Because the infrastructure that private equity is buying isn't being built in Silicon Valley, it's happening in your neighborhood. Private equity-backed developers are buying up farmland and industrial parks in suburbs across America to build these massive data center campuses. So places that used to be quiet rural counties are turning into server farms so big they make Walmart look small. But I guess the good news is that people are fighting back. In Virginia, where a lot of these data centers are, a project with 84 data centers where one data server is the size of 2 Walmarts actually ended up being stalled, along with $46 billion in other developments. But this community backlash isn't just about land. And what all this investment from private equity fails to mention is that it's actually about power. And a perfect example is OpenAI's $500 billion Stargate project that will require 10 gigawatts, so power enough for 26 million homes or the entire state of Texas where I live in. And that's just one project. With the amount of investment into US data centers that are being built, it's estimated that combined, it will now draw as much power as 10 to 15 major cities, not to mention the millions of gallons of water a day. And the thing is, the US grid can't handle this. One nuclear plant is around 1 gigawatt of energy, and we built one in the US in the last 30 years. Renewable energy is currently limited by tariffs, and data centers take around 2 to 3 years to build, while power plants take 5 to 10. So what are these companies doing? Well, you really think that with all that money from big tech and private equity, they haven't found workarounds? Their solution has been installing gas turbines directly at these data centers. And they're strategically choosing states like Tennessee that lets them fast track environmental review, all the while going against their own green pledges that they made to show how much they care about the environment. And that's exactly why nearly 1 in 5 US data centers are now concentrated in communities already dealing with a bunch of pollution. So with all that said, I think that you and I can at least cut some slack if they're at least paying for the increased power usage. But lobbying is also in there. They're blocking laws that would make tech companies pay for the grid upgrades that they cause. So instead, regulation allows utility companies to spread the cost across everyone, meaning you could soon see an extra $10 to $20 on your monthly bill. And even if that sounds like peanuts, if 50% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, every dollar is going to count. Now look, most of you watching are Americans who care about a strong economy. So maybe I'm just being a devil's advocate here, but could this all be forgiven if private equity-backed data centers create tons of jobs, right? Well, during construction, it does. A new data center can employ over 1,000 workers for construction, but once it's built, a typical data center actually only employs around 50 full-time workers. That's it. That's if the data center even ends up being used. Because the thing is, there are already signs that we're building far more than the market will ever need. Because remember CoreWeave? Their entire business model depends on renting out chips to AI labs from their private equity financed data centers. But the thing is, chip rental prices are crashing. NVIDIA B200 chips went from $3.20 per hour per chip to now $2.80 per hour, which is below break even for many of these sort of operators. So that's sort of a red flag of oversupply, but it introduces the risk. Let's say if the demand that we're predicting never catches up, entire data centers could become stranded assets. And it's happened before, just like the 19th century railroad lines that lead to nowhere. And so if data centers become underutilized, the lenders who finance all this are going to take some massive losses. And with all these things connected, huge parts of the AI supply chains could become financially distressed. So you might be thinking that everything that I'm saying so far, doesn't that point to a bubble? From the circular funding to private equity building infrastructure that no one might end up using, not to mention the cost that communities pay while getting their jobs potentially replaced. But here's the thing. When the bet is as big as potentially replacing human labor, it's not going to be like other bubbles where if it pops, the market resets and life goes on. This bet is different. And so obviously I can't predict the future, but to show you why, let me walk you through the 3 scenarios of what will happen next to understand why this is a black hole. So since it's been a little bit too doomer, for your sake, let's start with the best case scenario. The hype actually catches up to reality and AI grows into its insane valuations and actually delivers on what the tech bros promise. And it's not that far-fetched. Think of like the dot-com bubble. Yes, a ton of companies went bankrupt and markets crashed, but from it came Amazon, Google, or even YouTube that you're using right now. And the same could happen here, where from the fallout, we get real technological breakthroughs and AI really does become a force multiplier that democratizes opportunity instead of deepening inequality. Because what if the early research stays true, where AI tools have been found to help lower skilled workers earn more, work faster, and compete better? And although without a doubt, some jobs will be replaced, but also millions of people end up upgrading their careers. So that's the best case scenario, but you and I both know that every advancement comes with a price. And the real question is, at what cost? Which brings us to the worst case scenario, the singularity. Not the sci-fi version where we upload our brains and transcend biology. I mean the real world version where government, big tech, and capital merge into one singular system of totalitarian control, and where this guy is calling all the shots.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
Yes?
I don't know. I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
Should
this.
the human race survive?
Yeah, it sounds insane, but is it that far-fetched when it's already happened before? After what happened in 2001, the US quietly rolled out total information awareness, where it justified wiretapping, mass data collection, government agencies spying on citizens, all because of fear. So when the playbook is all the same, is it crazy that in the worst case scenario that this happens in the name of security? Again, I don't know, but hopefully we don't end up in this dystopian nightmare. So what is the most likely scenario? Because some creators say it's a bubble, others say it's not, or maybe a combination of both, but I really do think that they're all looking at it wrong. Because everything I've described so far isn't a bubble, it's more of a black hole. And there are three primary reasons why. The first is there's no exit. Big tech and Wall Street and the world at large are in an arms race to meet AI expectations. But AI infrastructure isn't capital that you can just pull back from. It's capital that gets sucked in the more you feed it. Every new chip requires more power, more servers, more cooling, more debt. And once the build out starts, the only direction is forward, even if demand never materializes. Not to mention, because so much of this is financed with private credit at double-digit interest rates, these companies can't slow down. They have to expand not because demand is real, but because the debt also requires it. So this isn't like a normal bubble where you're buying assets hoping to flip them later. In this case, once a data center is built, who the hell are you going to sell a giant server farm to? Which leads to the second point, that there's no truth. These assets stay on the books at full value because they barely trade. And there's no price discovery until a bankruptcy forces a fire sale. So on paper, everything can look healthy, even if the real value is collapsing underneath. And because most of this sits inside private equity, private credit, and corporate balance sheets, the public might not ever end up seeing what's actually happening. Just like Enron was able to get away with it, clever accounting lets you depreciate slowly over 20 years, when in reality, a drop in utilization can wipe out the value overnight. So investors, regulators, and the public all operate under an illusion, not because anyone's hiding it, but because the system doesn't require the truth. Which leads me directly to the third and most important reason why this is a black hole. Because if it breaks, there will be no alarms. Traditional bubbles usually burst when sentiment flips and then everybody panics at once. But I don't see AI collapsing that way. As long as big tech keeps announcing breakthroughs and trillion-dollar deals, confidence is going to stay artificially high, because that bet to replace human labor is a bet that we've never even seen before. And not to mention, with stock prices continuing to hit record highs, no one's pulling the plug anytime soon. But even if confidence really does slip to record lows, I don't think it will even be a sudden pop. It will be more so a slow bleed where server farm construction pauses, AI startups quietly start shutting down, and utilization starts dropping. And again, because private credit is financing a lot of this, the public might not really notice for months. So to put it simply, this won't be like a Lehman Brothers moment like in 2008. It'll be more so like 1,000 micro failures all happening slowly behind closed doors. And this is exactly what Michael Berry started warning about in this AI black hole. Turns out Google's actually quietly extended the useful life of its servers and network gear from 4 years to 6 years. And that alone cut its 2023 depreciation cost by about $3.4 billion and magically boosted reported profits by nearly $3 billion without doing anything. They're not alone. Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, they've all done the same. And in total, big tech has added almost $10 billion to profits over 2 years just by declaring that their hardware now lasts 6 years instead of 4. And it's this red flag on paper that Burry is pointing out, is that if everybody is treating AI servers and chips as if they'll generate value for 6 years, there's gonna be some problems when the hardware might actually become obsolete in 2 to 3 years. So that's the bottomless black hole, while also having every ingredient of a bubble. A world-changing story, concentrated debt, steady financing, and exposure spread across banks and private credit. But instead of popping, the capital just gets swallowed, disappearing into depreciation, energy bills, and endless debt payments. And so obviously no one knows what's actually going to happen, but what's clear is that the pace of change and investment into AI isn't slowing down, it's accelerating. Just as I was finishing this video, the White House signed an executive order called the Genesis Mission, which is essentially a federally funded push to win the race for AGI, or artificial general intelligence, and it's literally like the Manhattan Project of artificial intelligence. So the details are still coming out, but what this means is that the AI bubble or black hole isn't just powered by big tech and Wall Street anymore, it's now backed by the full weight of the US government as every country competes in this era's Cold War arms race. And again, it's this big bet that the world is competing on that makes it foolish to call this an AI bubble instead of what it is, a black hole. So whether you're for AI or against it, here's what you can do. Learn how power moves, and don't be the guy in the comment refusing to embrace change. Because here's the thing, even if you can't change the system, the next best move is to learn to understand it. Because once you do, you can use that knowledge to protect yourself or even profit like Michael Burry did in 2008 when everybody else chose ignorance instead. Because in a world of money and power fueled by AI, ignorance is only going to be the most dangerous position of them all. And so if you're watching this channel, you're in the right place. I'll be diving even deeper into this next week in my free newsletter in the video description. But if you haven't seen my last video on AI's impact on the job market, go and watch our video on it. And don't forget to like and subscribe to learn how money and power works.